So this panel would be moderated by Tom Davenport. Tom is a distinguished professor at Babson College, a fellow at MIT Initiative of Digital Economy, author of several books, the most recent being AI Advantage that you can see at the booth outside. So with that said, Tom, on to you.
Thanks, Fareed. Welcome to our subterranean lair. I think it'll be a fun panel, and as usual, I'll say a few words sort of about the field in general, and then we'll find out what's really happening from our panelists, and I'll introduce them. Well, maybe I'll introduce them now while their names are on the screen. Starting to my left, we have Bill Kracunas, who is the managing partner for consulting, I think, at RSM, the US version thereof. The next person, I can tell, looks different from the others, and her name is Katherine Johnson. I met Katherine last night. Some of the others I only met today. She's Director of Emerging Technologies for the Eastern Division. I'll let her tell you later, perhaps, why she manages the Eastern Division from Phoenix, Arizona. But anyway, she works for Trace3, which is an emerging technologies services firm. So she's right at the core of things. And then we have Vince DiMascio, who is CTO and CIO, as if one of those jobs weren't hard enough. He has both of them. For, I don't know if you guys still spell it out, Barry, Appleman, and Leiden, is that right? Leiden, but BAL, everybody tends to call it, an immigration law firm in San Francisco. Then we have Shane Jason Mock, who is Vice President for R&D at American Fidelity, a P&C only, or?
Health.
Okay, health with a health insurance company in Oklahoma City, and he managed to escape the tornadoes just in time. So I'll say a little bit about this whole issue, this whole area of robotic process automation, which is not the only thing we'll talk about this afternoon, but maybe the core issue. We'll look at how companies are making use of that technology. Is it a kind of a useful thing to have around? I think we'll generally say yes, but perhaps with some more subtleties. Firms are increasingly combining robotic process automation and AI. I mean, I tend to, when I'm talking about different types of AI, I tend to throw RPA in. Granted, it's the dumbest form of AI out there, but it's getting smarter all the time, and I think it's not terribly helpful to say, oh, it's, you know, it's in a completely different category. But I should say then RPA and other forms of AI, specifically machine learning. RPA is one example of a burgeoning category of automation technologies, which Vince has labeled automation sprawl. I've already stolen that idea with attribution from him and written about it. We'll say a little bit about that. How are we organizing and managing these technologies? And do we have any humans in the audience? Sometimes people want to know, what does this mean for the humans? It's kind of an old idea to even ask that question, but we will ask that question. So robotic process automation, if you haven't been paying a lot of attention, or you know, maybe you sneered at it because it wasn't as smart as you thought it should be, it may not be that smart, but it's growing at an unbelievable rate. I mean, you should see some of the revenue growth figures for the vendors in this space. It is not a robot. It, you know, kind of doesn't walk around or anything like that. It's just a program on a server. I argued for years it's a bad name, but nobody paid any attention. It is really good at a certain class of tasks, typically quite structured, easily specifiable, information intensive, because RPA can kind of go back and forth, often called a swivel chair technology, between different systems and pull information out of one and put it into another, which is, you know, what humans have been doing for a while. It's typically a sort of back office thing, but I've talked to a few organizations that use it with customers. If you want to get into the specific definition, people tend to say, okay, it's workflow oriented. It has a presentation layer interface to information systems. It uses rules to sort of make some decisions along that workflow, and it's very easy to design the workflow, you know, the usual sort of, looks like Visio basically if you haven't seen the user interface. Typically, people say, well, it's more robust than a screen scraping program, but typically a little less robust and kind of architectural than a big, you know, business process management system. Generally, there certainly are exceptions, but quite fast implementations, sometimes in a matter of weeks or even days, and high ROI. You're not spending all that much on it in terms of labor, or, you know, the software is relatively inexpensive and the returns can be quite substantial. And we'll probably talk about this issue, but more and more, because of its ability to kind of pull information from one place and put it into another, a lot of people are saying, I think Vince was one of the people who mentioned this on our prep call, system integration, you know, expensive and difficult, RPA, cheap and easy. Maybe we can use it as a way to integrate across systems, and some people are starting to do that. So just broadening the landscape a little bit, I've been doing a little bit of research on kind of different options for automation. As Vince had pointed out, these things are all kind of sprawling into each other. So this was one company's, I don't think they need to, for it to be secret, Procter & Gamble has a center of excellence about automation, and they identified these, 6 types. And they said, but it's really hard to even classify things, because as soon as you classify, the vendor says, oh no, we can do that too. You know, we're all adding AI, we're all spreading out from, we were IT automation, now we do HR automation and various other kinds of task types. So I think this category is going to be one that's very interesting to pay attention to over the next several years, and potentially somewhat confusing for organizations that have to kind of figure out a strategy for it. So I think that's it for that set of slides. I was going to hold up my tablet here and pretend that I was reading my questions off the tablet, but I messed up the questions, so I will just admit that I have some paper, previous technology. But let's get into what are people doing with this stuff, and starting mostly with RPA, I guess. It's nice we have 2 organizations who help other organizations put this kind of technology in, and 2 that are actually doing it themselves. Bill, for you, and Katherine, I guess same question. What are you doing for your clients in this regard? What kinds of use cases do you see them wanting to do RPA with?
I guess I'll start.
Go ahead, please.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Or you can if you'd
No,
like.
go ahead.
You know, I think what happens is a lot of people, it's kind of like going into Whole Foods hungry. It's just not a good idea. People have big visions around process automation. And I think once people see the fundamentals and get to know it, they get real excited. And I would say what happens is, I think sometimes their eyes are a little bit bigger than their stomachs, so to speak. So what I've seen at my clients is where they're taking things that are very discrete, very simple, and automating them. So not, you know, keeping it simple, not trying to automate something very complex, but say AP processing, right? There's a very simple AP invoice. Like, can we take that process? Can we move to RPA? What I love seeing broadly what RPA is doing is, I think it's putting pressure on society to become smarter. And I think organizations and people are starting to realize that really quickly, that, gosh, you know, we've got to up our games as humans if we're going to stay competitive here as these RPA bots come along.
Either get smarter or get unemployed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think people, that sort of light switch is going off for some people. While RPA may have been Henry Ford's dream, I think that, you know, it is going to drive mankind to have smarter roles and to develop these bots and to automate processes versus processing them themselves. So I think for my clients, where they really keep it simple and they keep it focused, they've been successful. The clients that haven't been that successful, I think they're trying to bite off a little bit more than they can chew and trying to do a little bit too much. You know, get the quick wins and go from there.
Yeah, and it's pretty well suited to relatively narrow tasks, you wouldn't say, okay, I'm doing my whole order to cash
Right.
process on RPA.
Yeah, not yet anyway.
Yeah.
But again, I think that's the vision people have,
Yeah.
which is a great vision. It's just, getting from here to Mars is a lot different, right? So, how do we sort of discreetly walk that and make sure we prove it out, have the right controls in place, and then scale it from there?
Especially as it emerges, as it continues to emerge, it's evolving. And so, just like you have so many solutions that are doing things, and in fact, I would say that now, it's not as if these companies that are presenting solutions, they've been around for 15 plus years. Some of them 20 years. Blue Prism has been 17 years, and so, but it's the perfect convergence of where we are in our technology landscapes. Over the last decade, companies continue to bring in innovative technologies, and it's added so many screens that we've now reached a human scale problem. And so a lot of our, my clients are looking for, how do I continue to scale my business when I can't keep throwing people at it? So instead of navigating so many different applications, let's start getting smarter about that. And that tends to be the use cases. So it's just something like call center, how many applications am I navigating per one call? That type of thing.
I think it's a great point, because people used to say, we need more recruiter. Let's get another recruiter. We need more people to hire. Well, maybe there's a way you can automate the existing people that will get you more productive.
Right.
It's an awesome point.
Yeah.
Or automate the recruiters.
I think they're trying.
They're trying to. They are
Exactly.
trying to. in case
I
you
think
haven't
that was a previous panel, but anyway. Vince, law firms are not generally known for their early application of new technology. What's going on at BAL, and why did you guys embrace RPA, or did you?
We have, and we're a technology-forward firm. We always have been, even since before I was there. It's one of the reasons I joined the firm. They've got a huge appetite to invest in technology and keep ahead of the industry being legal, not just immigration. We're using RPA with the focus on client experience. So we want to do for our clients all the legal services that we provide now, faster, higher quality, real time, on demand, things that humans would otherwise have to be staffed to be able to do. So if I submit documents, the US government, like you, Tom, likes paper, and it's not all digital. And so we need to have an intake process where someone can take a photograph of it, a robot can classify it, get information from it, go collect other information from other sources, wage data, things like that, and bring it all together. The swivel chair type work you were talking about, our industry is replete with swivel chair work, and these systems don't have APIs. And so connecting to them is very expensive, and maintaining those connections is very expensive. And as you were saying, with the RPA systems, those connections are really easy to deploy. And if they change, they're really easy to maintain. So we're bringing it in really in the interest of enhancing the client experience and doing things that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do, because the cost of human staff would be so high that our prices would be untenable to our clients.
Yeah, and lawyers hate to raise their prices.
Well, right,
generally,
yeah,
of course. I think a lot of interesting points here, but why don't we get to Shane Jason. Shane Jason told me a little bit about some of the ways you're using RPA and AI, but before we get into that, how about do you have some pure RPA things?
Absolutely, yeah. So one of the fun things is, we're using RPA to connect some of our Salesforce data over with some of our Adobe video building. So we're able to do automated customized content for each of our employer groups. So we can take their logo, we can take their name, we can take their account rep's name, and we can take their specific benefits that they have selected in their group, and we can take all of that, and it's very specific to each and every group, and RPA can do that at scale, can build those automated customized videos, build automated customized content for each and every employer. Give
Wow.
that personal touch at scale, kind of that boutique at scale.
That sounds like something that would be challenging for me to do. I'm impressed that the RPA can do it. I take back what I said about it being dumb. But so, how's the payoff so far? I mean, has this been a high ROI thing? Let's start back with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just there's things that we're doing that we wouldn't even try to do with humans. The video content at scale, we never would have tried to do that we're seeing great returns on our investment. We're really fortunate to be kind of in an area of the country where there's a lot of electrical engineers and petroleum engineers. The oil market's a little bit crazy right now, so we're able to bring a lot of them in. They're looking for internships, and we have some of the smartest people in the world that are able to pick this up in a couple weeks and start running and helping us build robots and automation. And so we're able to do it at a really cheap way, efficient way, and scale up from there.
Vince, did you guys measure the ROI, or?
We have, we are measuring the ROI. We're measuring it in task units completed, automation, like tasks that we have, so end-to-end tasks, hours saved. What we're after, though, is that ability to grow revenue by providing better services, right? And so that means we're giving our paralegals the capacity to get on a hangout with a client and talk them through the stressful journey of an H-1B and what's happening. And if our paralegals are entering data and reading documents and keying in information, they don't have the time to provide that service, which at this point, with where things are with immigration inbound to the U.S., there's a high demand there. And a number of hours saved. Just one example is there's something called an RFE, a request for evidence. If you submit an application for a visa, the U.S. government will come back with, usually, increasingly, a request for more information about more documentation and so on.
They don't just say, forget about it.
No, not exactly.
That's coming soon, probably. Right?
Some of that's boilerplate language that's been tailored by the attorney at the government. And so our robots can receive that letter, it's printed, read it, interpret it, and draft a response letter, point by point, which saves on a per RFE basis, up to an hour, which is material for us. That's a high volume transaction for us, and it allows us to advocate for our clients and get that right back to the government very quickly, and it's huge for us.
Do you still charge for that hour?
Well,
No comment. No
to enhance
comment.
to enhance service.
Just as you would never consider charging for hours that are not done at RSM. Right?
Oh, we would charge for it, absolutely. It's an efficient process. Fixed to you.
But neither of you, it sounds like, do kind of numerical calculations of ROI. I mean, you count hours, but some of the early case studies, Mary Lassity and Leslie Wilcox, a couple of academics in the information systems field, did some early case studies. It's very, very nice work, but 700% ROI, is that the kind of thing that you're seeing, or do you even know?
That's order of magnitude, right?
Really?
It's a very inexpensive system to implement, and you can proceed very slowly and on a small scale. You're not required to have a massive investment. And if you partner with the right outside vendors, they can help you get your systems up and running quickly. And then during the 90 first quarter, say, engagement with an outside vendor, you have people there who can mentor your team. And the skill set you don't need to be a software engineer.
Or data scientist.
Right, like you said, it's like Visio. You have to understand the process, know the business, be trusted, right? And it's more about that than it is about understanding how to engineer software.
Yeah, we're definitely tracking the time saved and all of that, but we're starting to think of it more in terms of the customer experience. How do we get those answers to customers faster? That's a little bit more difficult to quantify. Mm-hmm. How do you increase customer happiness? That's a little bit more difficult to quantify, but we're really trying to shift our focus there, because just the time savings is absolutely there, and orders of magnitude. I totally agree with that. It's phenomenal when you start to look at it. But also the customer experience, reduced errors, that type of stuff is more difficult to get hard numerical answers around, but it's definitely there.
Sure. So I have a question for Katherine and Bill about this. Put you both a little bit on the spot. Some consultants I've talked to have said, RPA, bad thing to consult on. It's just too easy. The client doesn't really need much help with it. Has that been your experience at all? Or?
It's not been my experience. It's certainly not the approach either. Typically, these are repeat clients of ours. They're looking for a trusted advisor. We're going to give the right, because these components are just going to continue to evolve and help them. So it's more like, yes, you should consider this as an opportunity to utilize automation, as opposed to, no, I won't make a lot of money out of that.
Yeah, and I would say a couple things just back to the case. We did have one case I remember where I think it was a life sciences company, lots of accounts payable, doctors spent a lot of money, and research scientists especially, and I think it was like $4.18 per invoice of a savings they got. It was about 50 grand a year for them from that one bot. So it was a pretty specific ROI that they had going on there. But one of the things I find with clients is I find that the conversation shifting a little from, we talk like digital transformation, and RPA is sort of a part of that. But I kind of think it's everybody's problem, RPA. Like every business leader today is going to need to know data, process automation. Like it's just a modern leader. So I think RPA, as much as IT is going to need to set the guardrails around it, it's kind of got to be everybody's problem. It's like a macro almost in Excel in some ways. Like where's the limit of that? So it's going to be interesting. But I do think it's everybody's problem, and regular leaders need to come up to speed on RPA. In my opinion.
I would expand that really to automation all in, right? Automation is going to be sort of that underlying thing that you're going to see, and it's creeping up in different parts, different business units in each company. And so that will become the staple. Right. How you approach it, I think RPA is one of the easiest ways to approach it. If you start getting into larger automation components, it gets extremely complicated, and the people problem becomes a problem.
Right. And so you can show them, so you start to guide them around some of the technologies, but then their skills, and maybe help them to get sort of a practice going internally, or get a few champions for RPA, and we'll help them get them up to speed. Again, it also depends how much they want to, distract their people from doing what they're doing.
In that way, you could almost say that RPA would be the gateway drug to larger automation.
Yeah, I've heard that line before, actually. How about this issue of the people-related concerns? Because I think it's fair to say none of you have seen large-scale layoffs because of RPA. Is that true? Or?
I think in financial services, we're starting to see some places where especially heavy investment organizations that are quite large made some adjustments in the last year that I think were directly related to digital transformation.
But again, RPA specifically, or?
I guess AI. I wouldn't say RPA specifically. I wouldn't say is the only thing. Again, I think it's hard because it's this culmination of a few technologies that end up getting you there.
Yeah.
A couple cloud solutions here, some RPA there, with a good data warehouse here. That's probably the wrong tool, but some good data analytics.
Yeah.
You can get pretty far down the road on some of that stuff. So I think FS, financial services, is unique, though, from an industry perspective.
There's a lot of structured back office work that involves moving information around.
Look up data here, look up data there. Let's say,
Right.
what is it telling us? Well, computers are very good at doing that.
So I actually have a specific company that had continued, going back to my earlier point, adding employees to scale their business out, and now they've reached that point where it just doesn't make any more sense. So they have a specific target of headcount reduction in this one area, utilizing automation, utilizing RPA. And so that is one of their specific goals, but they had to scale in people to get to this point, and now the math doesn't work the same.
Yeah.
But that's the exception, I would say.
It is
right?
completely the
Yeah.
exception.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think UBS has said because of RPA, we're gonna let go a lot of people, mostly in India, they said. But it's unusual, I think, for a company to declare that. How about the two of you, Vincent, Shane, Jason? You were talking more about preventing adding people and getting better service and so on?
Right. So we're a growing company, and we have a lot of people that are getting ready to retire. So as that happens, we would love to just hold our headcount steady. That's kind of how we're thinking about it. What can we do as we add more customers? What can we do to service them and have fantastic service levels, but keep our headcount in check? We don't think that this is going to be any different than the mid-1980s, where we had people, if you wanted to write a memorandum, we had a pool of people. You would go and they would type up your memorandum for you, and then the computers came in and emails came in and jobs shifted, and We don't think it's going to be too much different than that. The people that were doing those jobs are doing different jobs. They had to go reskill and retool. And so we're thinking a lot about retraining and what are those skills that folks are going to need in the future, and how do we build a training robust program around that to really help those colleagues make that transition.
And Vince, you said
Right,
paralegals aren't trooping out the door with their possessions in hand.
No banker's boxes full of items. We have a very similar story. We're about 1,000 people now. We have 200 open recs out. Look, we're hiring like crazy. We're hiring in this area of RPA in IT, and we will likely see through normal attrition those jobs shift, but we're not looking to eliminate a function or reduce headcount in particular areas, because the timing of it is such that we can reposition people we have enough demand that we can reposition as those rote tasks are delegated to machines.
And you think the impact is primarily on paralegals as opposed to attorneys?
Yeah, I mean, it all rolls downhill, kind of.
Yeah.
So the more rote work is being done in shared service centers, and that will be the area of highest impact. And we'll continue to move the types of work, once they're harmonized and fully documented, or we have systems that can handle probabilistic outcomes, we'll shift that down the line to the robots and upskill our people, so in the client service and into strategic talent management, and where our clients really want us to be working. What we're in business to do. It's not data entry.
Sure.
We want to get rid of that.
Sure. But I guess one more question about this issue. If people are saying we want to grow without adding people, I mean, obviously that's okay in the current economy in the US because we don't have that many people to throw in anyway. We're sort of fully employed. But in general, does it make any of you think what's going to happen, for example, to entry-level workers in the future, like people who might be related to us as children or grandchildren or something like that? Is this going to depress demand for those entry-level jobs going forward? There's a big story in the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago with graduation season. People continue to complain coming out of school. They expect me to have 5 years of experience, coming right out of school, which is hard to do in college, I think. So any of you have any thoughts about that issue?
One thing that comes to mind, I'll tell you, because I think it's going to start with what I'd say mundane tasks, mundane labor. Maybe, people fresh out of school. But
yeah, that's what they tended to do, right, is those mundane tasks.
But what really startled me, I was talking to this woman, she's a ear, nose, and throat surgeon here in Boston, and she said to me, she goes, I was telling her about this event actually, and she goes, oh, it's funny you mentioned that, I'm glad I'm a surgeon. I was like, well, why did you say that? She said, well, we did a little study where we realized RPA for doctor's visits is way more accurate than your primary care. Why? Because it can look at endless images of a rash, endless. And it can analyze yours, and it can probably tell you, in fact, at 44% more accuracy than the doctor test we did of what your symptoms are. So the robotic process automation was 44% more accurate. She's like, now, when are people going to be okay with that, and how's it going to shift? We don't know. The medical community is kind of like, oh, goodness. Because really what we've built is a bunch of people who've read a lot of books, seen a lot of examples, and are good at connecting the dots. Well, guess what RPA is really good at in AI? And so it was really interesting just to hear a doctor really his perspective, I think, about she's glad she's a surgeon talking about the future. Because she's like, at least I can program the robot to do the surgery,
I think that's a great point, because I think it's really about democratizing knowledge, because you have RPA that can interact with all these different systems, or you have traditional APIs that can interact with some systems. And you have the RPA component, and then if you think about that subject matter expert, and you think about all the decisions they made over the last 20 years, and if you have the data that went into those decisions, that's a classic machine learning problem, or deep learning in the case of images. So you start to connect those two, and you can essentially clone that subject matter expert and insert them into every system that you need to. What's interesting about that is if you have the subject matter expert, if you have the doctor, it's hard to get an appointment, or it's hard, you have to email the person, you have to wait. They're hard to get on the phone because they're really good at what they do. So there is a shift there with the democratization of knowledge, where you'll be able to get all of that feedback that you need, that decision that you need within just a few seconds.
Democratization sounds like a very appealing word unless you're the person who had the knowledge before and were making money by selling it, right?
Unless you're the one democratized.
Any other comments on this idea of what happens to entry-level workers, or if our economy were not quite as prosperous as it were now, the fact that we're not hiring new people to grow, is that going to be an issue?
I think we've got examples in public accounting, in law, in litigation. Document review used to be how new attorneys would cut their teeth, and there was you understand the business and you understand the facts of the case because you've read 1,000 emails between these two parties who were subject to litigation. And
first it was $250 an hour attorneys,
right.
And then it was contract document reviewers at $20 an hour, and now it's machines.
Technology-assisted review, right?
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
those, it's a similar concept, predictive coding and natural language processing and those systems. And what it's not done is made lawyers dumber, right? It's not, that area of practicing law, if you will, by reading documents and saying responsive, non-responsive, hot doc, it just doesn't add the value that bringing an associate with you as a senior associate or a partner and talking through the merits of the case and the legal matters. That's what they want to be doing. That's what, clicking through a document or entering that data just.
But
the
it
same
probably
thing with CPA is reviewing journal entries and ticking and tying and.
But hasn't it? I mean, I gather if you don't go to a top-tier law school, it's not that easy to get a job as an entry-level lawyer these days, right? Presumably related to that contract document review stuff that they used to do all the time, or will we see more of those kinds of issues?
I think the present economy, maybe is a little
Not a
different,
problem.
right?
Yeah.
not a problem.
I think, though, across the board, you're going to see it. Of course, it's no different than what we've been experiencing as technology has changed us, right? So you could even say the calculator at one point in time was considered automation, right? And now that's just kind of something we don't even classify. And so when you take like Amazon, for example, they've got the Amazon Go stores that are, you want to talk about entry-level jobs, not necessary anymore. They're testing a model that says the store is unmanned.
Not the ones I've been in 5 of them, and they all have at least 3 people. One to help you with your app to get in the store. One because I look like I'm less than 21 years of age, so they had to check my license, believe it or not, to buy a bottle of wine. And another one, not me, I promise, somebody dropped a bottle of wine in the store that I was in, and a man came out and started cleaning it up. Apparently the robots are not good enough at that yet. So 3 people in a convenience store seemed like a lot.
I think they
to
closed
me,
them all.
But it's interesting because it's not a replacement, it is a change, though. And so, of course, there's going to be some people that don't change or will not change, but it is going to present a change.
And I think the associates could have a leg up if they're smart, because they should have the latest and greatest education on this stuff. So if our college and universities are guiding them the right way, they should come out arguably with some of the sharpest skills. When I see some of the talent that does come out at the lower levels today, their productivity in the cloud is incredible, compared to mine, which I guess isn't saying much, but, think about that. So I think that is a leg up that they're going to have to just learn to really, apply that sort of that new technical edge. They are the latest digital talent that we have to offer. And so we're expecting them to bring some of that thought to us. We ask our associates, help us improve the process. You should be the smarter, you just got a degree. You should bring us something with that. What did you learn that we don't know?
It's interesting because the workforce now, you could potentially have 5 generations in the workforce right now. And those that are entering the workforce right about now have never known life without Facebook. Mm-hmm. So when you think about what they could bring to the table and how that can change your organization, that's a huge culture shift.
That's right. They know how to waste time better than any previous generation.
But look entirely busy.
But look really.
Some of you have already brought up different forms of AI, and I know I interviewed Shane Jason about this. Can you say a little bit about your combination of RPA and machine learning, and why you thought that was necessary and so on, and the rest of you be thinking about that too?
Right. So we were, working with RPA, and we were working with machine learning kind of independently. We have UiPath and DataRobot kind of independently. Those are the vendors we work with. And with both of those, they were, doing great things for us. And we were trying to build a robot, an RPA robot, to help us with customer emails. So all of our customer emails, they come into a common queue, and then somebody traditionally would have to go read those and then decide which department to send those to. So there's different departments that each email needs to go to. And so we were able to try this with keywords, and that absolutely did not work. We thought, keywords, change of address, we'll be able to find that pretty easily. And we had several keywords we thought would work pretty well. Did not work at all. And so we were talking and brainstorming, okay, how can we solve this? And we thought, well, let's try this machine learning component. And so we brought that in, and with the automated machine learning and some of the tools that are out there, you can spin up a machine learning model in a couple of hours once you have the data, and find the best fitting model within a couple of hours. And so it worked really well. We were getting some great accuracy scores. I was still a little bit skeptical, and I was still a little bit hesitant to just launch this. And so we did a lot of testing, and we worked with our operations folks. And they are so good at giving feedback, saying this doesn't work at all, or saying, oh, this is fantastic. And the feedback we got was, this is fantastic. So we were able to train the machine learning algorithm to recognize which bucket those emails needed to go in, and to route those. So we had this RPA component that was going through this legacy email system that we have, opening the emails, passing that off to our machine learning component, and the machine learning component was making a decision. And then the RPA piece was routing that throughout the company.
Yeah, that seems to be the general rationale for introducing machine learning into RPA, is when you need to make a decision that's sort of more database than a rule can address, right? Vince, have you done anything like that?
We have. The one example that comes to mind is the RFP Response Generator. That's RPA. We use UiPath also. But we have a model, a natural language processing model that does paragraph similarity. So we can say, oh, the government attorney is using this kind of an attack, so let's use that kind of a response that corresponds to it. And so for the identification of what's coming in and the reading of it, we have machine learning models to do that matching. And similar, we had to use word vectors and space and all that rather than edit distance, or comparing the terms themselves with frequency. So it's something that RPA platforms just don't have, right? So you either, like what we did, you build it yourself and make it available as an endpoint that the robot can hit and get back. And that's what's great about the robot, is it can be the glue to do just about anything you can do with a desktop computer, or use a system like a DataRobot, which we don't use. We're looking into it though.
Okay.
That's an example.
Yeah. If you have some questions, we're getting toward the time when we will try to answer them. So submit them to Slido.com. If you didn't download the app, use the hashtag MITCIO. Katherine and Bill, are you seeing a lot of demand among your clients for the intersection of RPA and machine learning, or some other AI? I think, Vince, you were saying earlier, you were talking about what sounded like OCR, character recognition, which we used to think of as AI. Now it's just a kind of common technology functionality, but that's another combination, right, in a sense, right?
And the OCR is, it's beyond OCR. OCR quality is just not that great, right? So and the variations of documents that we receive, it's a resume or a birth certificate or a lot of different information that supports a visa application. So our OCR, it's a black box you can submit a document to, and based on the visual arrangement of items on the page and some of the content, it'll say, this looks like a passport, this looks like a birth certificate, and it has to read different languages and all of that. And then there's a separate service that you post that image to once it's been classified that extracts the data.
So that's this high-class OCR. That's still AI. The low-class OCR is not AI anymore, maybe.
Right.
It's probably the most popular, I'd say, AI that we see out there too.
Together,
document handling.
paired with RPA, you mean, Bill, or just in general?
Just in general, I'd say, especially we're also a CPA firm, so like there's this new lease standard and auditing standards. Well, reading a lease and extracting the key points from it's a pain in the ass, and there's a good AI. But one of the issues, there's so many vendors right now. There's so many applications. It's kind of like when cars were invented or ERP systems. There's like so many popping up that I can't wait for the industry to consolidate a little. Quite frankly, it'll be nice for us all.
Let's
but
put some of these companies out of business. Don't buy anything more from them. Yeah.
But there's a lot of little niche players that do these things and a lot of industries that are a huge benefit. And I'd say this sort of OCR on steroids is definitely, the biggest case that we see in terms of just extracting key points. And then if you could, to your point, you hook it up to the RPA and you could do kind of fancy stuff with it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Katherine,
we see
you do emerging technologies. Is RPA and AI an emerging combination?
So automation and AI are
Yeah.
certainly a combination, especially security. Cybersecurity was one of the first ones where we saw a lot of it, and that's an area where the threat vectors are continually growing. And we're getting, as IT leaders, they're getting beyond the point where they just want to be notified that there's a problem, right? Because so far we've lived, and this is really all of business, we're notified that there's a problem, and then a human goes to fix it. So instead of just telling me there's a problem, get me to an automation point where you can also fix it. Create that decision process, go ahead and fix it, and again, allow me to scale as the threat vectors scale. So just for an example, so the combination of machine learning and automation is tool by tool by tool. And so as a company who's looking like, what does our automation journey look like? You're going to have these different entry points like that.
That's a great example that we use at BAL in our SOC because we want our people to be doing the highest value work, and cordoning off a system and fingerprinting it and returning back a first level report to an analyst is not high value work in security.
Cybersecurity analyst, you mean?
Right.
Yeah.
An entry level cybersecurity analyst will go and run and map into all those tools. Well, the bot can do all that. There's a playbook for that. And it's deterministic. And so we dispatch the bot, and then our analysts don't just get an alarm, they get a report. And they can start working on it right away, and the system's been cordoned off in some cases.
Yeah, we're working on something similar with Augmented Intelligence, knowing, okay, who and where do we need to identify our potential difficulties with our business. So we're automating our reporting with the RPA piece, and then we're running it through machine learning anomaly detection, some heuristic rules, and also some other machine learning methods to start to release customized reports to say this is what you need to look at. Go look at this. Doing some of the analysis. We're still going to have the humans doing the analysis, but we're going to pair that with a first level machine learning augmentation.
And I think to your point earlier, it's like because we do a lot with automation anywhere, and they're sort of blurring that lines between RPA and cognitive. Like I said, these applications they do a lot, so you got to kind of wade through them to figure out best fit.
Yeah, let's talk about that general issue of sort of automation. Is this a general category? As Katherine said, we've been talking about automation for a long time in the IT field, but is there something new today? Is there a need for a company like Procter & Gamble to say, okay, we've classified these 6 types of automation. We have an automation center of excellence to sort of figure out which one. Is this an important area of IT in organizations now?
I think going back to Bill's point, it's an important area in business.
Yeah.
Right. Because you no longer need to have developer skills to create and deploy a robot, and that means we have these citizen developers, and we can empower our people to automate their own work that they don't want to be doing. I think there is that organizational component to it.
And that's a big challenge because what happens is it's distributed IT in some ways. So next thing you know, if I'm an end user, I automate a process, like who's cataloged that? Who's inventoried it? Is there like a mini software development lifecycle that needs to be done to catalog that bot, to inventory it? So I think having those controls or set of how you guys want it set towards IT is important.
Back to your earlier question, Tom, I think that's where the consulting value is. Is an organizational change.
That occurred to Bill.
Right, just now, right?
Yeah.
It's the change management and the center of excellence, those sorts of
Yeah, I've heard of a couple of people who have almost gotten fired because of RPA because they, it acts like a human user, and so they said, don't worry, we don't need to get a logon ID and a password for this RPA. I'll just give it mine. And so the cybersecurity people said, this person is unusually productive. Maybe something's going on here. And
it still requires governance.
Right. Yeah, particularly if you're talking about hundreds or thousands of bots. It's also, any of you found it, I don't know if you've gotten to that scale yet, but it becomes a sort of architectural concern when you have 1,000 bots and you change the underlying systems that it interfaces with, and suddenly you're stuck with 1,000 users who don't know how to use the system anymore. Has that come up at all, or is it too early for that?
Yeah, we definitely, if those systems change, then you have to make tweaks to the robot. Usually it's not a major overhaul, but you have to have those tweaks. And so that's where the governance comes in, and the communication with IT, and knowing what's changing and what's shifting and how's that going to impact your robots. And definitely you've got to have that whole structure in place, because if you don't, it's a bad day.
It's funny, in some ways it's like, because I love the inter-office memorandum, I forgot who said that, right? I think it was you. But those jobs went away of the people doing that, but then it evolved to all of a sudden exchange administrators and email servers, and all those jobs popped up when those went away. And I think it is going to be another one of those sort of trade-offs over time where certain things will go away, but new things are going to pop up. Like, think when robots are moving around, like they're going to break, they're going to need help. Like, in some ways, I feel like when they become physical, more immersed, and these logical robots, someone's got to take care of them all. Someone's got to maintain them. So, so maybe the jobs of what they were doing just shifts to those types of jobs over time,
Yeah, if people are nimble enough to develop those new skills.
Associates.
In Massachusetts, we have these great mills up in Lawrence and Lowell that were the site of a previous generation of automation, but and I guess for people who worked in those mills, not such a good thing. Yeah. But apparently the people who could configure, fix, install those textile machines, a huge demand for them. Yeah. And I think the same thing probably happened here. One question I have here on my electronic device. Can you tell us about any RPA or AI-based project failures? And if you know of any, what caused them and how can they be avoided? Anybody know of that?
So, I'll go with that one. Yes, failures, but a lot of the failure, 100% of the failure came down to not understanding or having clear drivers to the use case. So it was more of, we're super excited, we're going to bring in this tool, but we didn't have a good use case for the tool. They went after a pain point instead of a gain point, spent a lot of time. It was such a pain point because the human process needed to be redone, and they were just trying to apply automation to a process that was already really bad to begin with, and so the project failed. So lack of clear drivers, and then going after a pain area instead of a gain area. I think RPA is one of those things where you need to find the quick wins and bring it in so that you can learn, adapt, and then continue to deliver.
Vince, I think it was you who raised an interesting point on our prep call. You said, I said something about, are you feeling the need to redesign your process before you automate it, what Katherine was just talking about, and you said, not so much anymore. It's often not worth the trouble to do that. You said a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the candle's not worth the game is the saying, I think, right? And you can develop and deploy these automations so rapidly that to try and build just like in software, to try and build the perfect version 3, by the time you get it out, your competition's in there with version 1 and they've eaten your lunch. And you don't have that same competitive threat, but you're not delivering value at the rate that you could and should be delivering. So we do not try and do much to processes. We'll look at, if there's something obvious that we can fix, we will before we impose automation or implement automation. But by and large, we take the process as it is, warts and all, and automate it because we can. And if a robot's doing something that's annoying or inefficient, so what?
That's another blow to the professional services industry. It was one of their jobs to come in and redesign
Right.
the process before automating it. But go ahead, put those consultants out of business.
Well, I mean, there is a cost. You incur debt in the form of maintenance that might not need to be there if there are a lot of exception paths that you could have eliminated through harmonizing your process early on. So there is some debt, but we think it's worth it at this stage of our RPA adoption. We do a lot of small things that people are doing that are really great on them, like not great, good, but great grading, and those things are done in a silly kind of way often.
Because a process that might be annoying to a human isn't that annoying to a robot that doesn't care about it.
Sure, they don't care. Yeah.
It's endless time. So I do think, and I also, back to the beginning where I said keep it real simple, I just remember one where there was like, okay, log into NetSuite, get this, close these invoice, but 1 out of 20 times you log into NetSuite, it asks you a challenge question. There's these little, the idiosyncrasies that you've got to work through, and you start to multiply that by the number of systems. So I would say, streamlining it will help make it a little bit easier. I'm not saying that you have to, again, I don't think you have to go to the extent of perfect automation, but simplification is good on some of it, and because the devil's in the detail on that.
Go ahead.
Even if you didn't have a failed deployment, you could find a failure in your bot sprawl, and the failure comes in change management. So working with another company, a large insurance company, they had so much that the changes that would need to be made, they weren't tracking that well. So what bot was doing what. And so, to err as human to make massive destruction can be automation. So you have to, keep an eye on when that's going to happen.
So I'm not getting a huge number of Slido questions here, so we may have to resort to the old-fashioned non-automated method of people actually raising their hands. Anybody have any questions for this panel? I have plenty more, but helpfully the lights have gone up. Thank you. Remember that old-fashioned approach to participation? I hope we don't get in trouble with Slido. They're not a sponsor, are they? Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, my question is, I don't think we covered this in the panel in interoperability, and I think that's the area where APIs are not available, particularly in fields of, say, healthcare, maybe legals. That's where the RPA is very useful. And have you guys seen, or you describe any experience in working with multiple systems? Here we're trying to reduce the mundane task, but getting help on integrating multiple systems with the API. RPA is much more valuable.
I have 2 examples. One is on the front office, and that is getting from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the foreign wage data sites, which are publicly available, but don't change, they haven't changed in years, and don't have APIs. Getting that data that is dynamic and based on dynamic input into our systems, as that's a swivel chair on the front office. And then in our back office, we use a very outdated HR management system, and that one doesn't have APIs. And so we use that in connection with new employee onboarding.
Yeah, and I would say, along with that, the classic RPA use case is taking something from a spreadsheet and pasting it into a mainframe system. And the insurance industry has a lot of mainframe systems still. A lot of infrastructure is happening, a lot of tech change is happening, but there's still a lot of legacy there. And what's crazy about that combination of RPA and AI, if you think about that antiquated green screen legacy mainframe 1984 system, and then you picture AI sitting on top of that cutting edge, leading edge, artificial intelligence, machine learning, making decisions in that space, that's a crazy anachronism to think through. And so, that really gives you the power. And then you also kind of mentioned interpretability, I think, there. And some of the vendors with the automated machine learning, they'll spit out feature impact, they'll spit out prediction explanations, so you get some understanding, which I think is powerful and huge. All of our AI projects, everybody asks first question, and they should, is, okay, how did it make that decision? How do you know? How do you know that's right? And so the statistical scores aren't enough. You've got to have that interpretability, and that's where I think some of the vendors are doing fantastic in that space, helping with the explainability and the interpretability, and it's so key to all of this in every industry and every piece of it. You've got to understand how did it arrive at that decision.
Any other Any other questions for this gang? Sure, in the blue
Can you
shirt.
just describe the companies that do that, explanation of the AI decision process?
Yeah, so the one we work with is DataRobot, and they just have they have two features in there. One's called Feature Impact, and one's called Prediction Explanations, and it spits out and says you can get the top 3 reason codes, the top 5, top 10, as to how it arrived at that decision. It'll give you the data point and why those particular categories, and it's unique to every instance. It's unique to every prediction that you're trying to make, and so it'll go through line by line and give that to you, which is huge deal right now.
Dennis, with that plug, you've got to get DataRobot as a sponsor next year. There was another question. Sure, go ahead.
So both of you, Vincent, Shane mentioned DataRobot. So what are the other companies working in this space that are helping companies doing RPA? And also, for you guys, what percentage is internal development versus using third-party tools?
Right. So we love to go through the third-party tools and use them. If you think back when automobiles first started, you had to build your own automobile and then drive it. You had to build your own car and then drive it. And then Henry Ford came along, and now you just go buy your car. And I have an actuarial background. I love mathematics. AI is a little bit different branch of mathematics, and there's important that you have understanding, but a lot of the third-party components have built-in guardrails, which is huge because AI can get messy, and there's a lot of things you have to think through. And so with that, we use the third-party vendors because they have those guardrails in place. Now you still have to know what's going on. You still have to understand that. But I think it's a lot easier than starting with a blank Python screen. And if you're starting with a blank Python screen, it just takes a lot longer to build and go through and make sure you're doing all the right steps. So you still have to know your stuff and still have to go through all the right steps, but it's just so much easier and so much faster.
So another company that's doing, it's a competitor to DataRobot would be H2O. But what these tools are bringing to bear is your ability to do modeling. And that is very difficult because most companies cannot, you can't source, and you certainly can't afford to have data scientists that are creating those models for you. And so these companies are creating these models. They're looking at your data. So, and you can apply so many use cases to it, and then you utilize RPA to bring that in to bear. So you could sit and use a DataRobot by itself or an H2O by itself and say, give me, based off of these 7 fields of data, hopefully they're clean fields of data, can you tell me what perhaps the potential churn of students would be based off of these 7, and it will give you what it is, it'll give you its probability, it'll tell you how it arrived there, it'll tell you which model it used, and you will be able to watch it go through it. And so those tools are just allowing you to be smarter without having to keep a data scientist on team to do that.
And we start with a blank Python screen and have a data scientist. And we're just identifying vendors now, and DataRobot, H2O, and I think AutoML is another leader. Yeah,
Google
right.
Cloud AutoML.
The GCP platform has some of those tools. But again, you don't need a PhD in data science to develop and run some of these models in an IPython notebook. It's not just a terminal. Some of these are, you can pick them up and with scikit-learn and some packages. It's not as scary as it may sound. And if you have mathematically inclined, with statistical background, you need to have that and understand what these models are. You do run the risk of not having the guardrails and that sort of thing, but you can use them. We do them and they work.
Interestingly enough,
we have time for one more question, if you don't mind. You had your hand up a while ago. Yeah.
Sure, yeah, I do some work with the SOC community at MIT, and one of the things we focus on, which everyone else calls the future of work, we call work of the future, because it's more about the work that we're going to be doing, because there's going to be work. You mentioned something earlier about upskilling, reskilling your current staff, and then you guys kind of talked about the new graduates coming in and where's that entry point for them? Do you not think that they're coming in kind of with these skills? Because I see a lot more of these people coming in with cybersecurity and AI, and machine learning and just very advanced technical skills. Do you not feel like that talent that's coming in is already kind of at a level to where you can easily kind of upskill them into more creative work in your organizations?
For us, we're hiring paralegal, like paraprofessionals and lawyers. There's a category of lawyers who code. Not all lawyers have coding on their resume. And many of the lawyers don't really want, they're happy to say they're bad at math. I do see in IT people who come in as business analysts, product managers, who have Python experience and can do this, and we're happy to bring them over. And we have a lot of business degree people who are in project management type roles who are coming over into our, that's who constitutes our RPA groups, nobody from the tech groups.
I think they do have the skills. I think you got to ask for it, though. A lot of times, I think traditionally associates would come in and it's like, it's like when I was a kid, we don't hear from the kids at the dinner table at the big family, but it's like, you want to hear from them actually today. In fact, they do have some of these skills inherent. That's a lot better than what some of the traditional workers have. So what we've been doing is really tapping them and inspiring them to say, speak up. If you see something stupid that we're doing because we're old, like we want to know. Like, use those skills you just paid all that money for and you just got, and help it have an impact on us. We want that. So I think a lot of them do have it. And it's just to them, it's like, oh, I didn't even know that was that valuable until I got in the workforce.
Yeah. They're just coming out, right? Show us, we don't know, you just learned this stuff, so I like that.
Automate something.
Yeah.
So I think the fact that Fareed is standing up suggests that we have run out of time, right? Subtle message there, Fareed. Thanks very much, all of you, for joining us. Thanks very much to the panel.